Input to outcomes. Online platforms as agents of culture. It matters what thoughts think thoughts. It matters what knowledges know knowledges. It matters what relations relate relations. It matters what worlds world worlds. It matters what stories tell stories. This essay examines digital media platforms as agents of culture. The discussion is framed as inputs regarding the cultural significance of media platforms and outcomes which impact cultural experience in observable ways. The perspective of this essay is informed by the foundational importance within user experience design of understanding the goals facilitated by the design. In the context of media platforms, user experience design requires attention to the goals of both the user and the media platform. In his BBC documentary named Hypernormalization, after a modern warfare strategy, Adam Curtis describes an existential problem relating to contemporary media and technology-influenced culture. Our imagined world, as he describes it. Because we accept it as normal, and because we don't have an alternative model of an alternative future, everyone just accepts it, even though they know it's a bit odd and a bit fake, but we have no other picture of the future. That's the problem. And the engineering system, the internet, does not supply it. It's beautiful in other ways, and it's great at organizing people, but we need a picture of the future. Curtis argues the shift to prioritizing the self and individualistic self-identity in modern cultures makes less likely the rise of collective movements together, which in previous generations effectively occurred and influenced social and cultural change, such as the American Civil Rights Movement. Democracy and openness, according to Robert Howard, were observably valued by early participants in digital technology, such as amateur enthusiasts, who embedded a vernacular philosophy in network digital communication. The author examines the influence of the Silicon Valley-based Homebrew Computer Club newsletter on individuals who would later become dominant in the digital platform industry, such as Steve Wozniak, Apple, and Bill Gates, Microsoft. He describes this philosophy contrasting with the large mainframe computer status quo to that point in history of computing, which restricted the technology to large organizations. Howard argues that the embracing of open architectures invited wide participation and contribution during the 1970s and laid a foundation for openness in the emerging internet. He cites the adoption of hypertext technology in this era as fundamental to subsequent vernacular cultural expression online. Don Norman coined the term user experience while working at Apple in the 1970s, and on the website of his consulting firm Nielsen Norman Group, he posits that user experience is broadly concerned with all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. In the case of digital platforms who derive value from user interaction, monitoring and data mining user-generated data has emerged as a source of value. In a 2013 public lecture, Michael Lopp describes working with colleagues to derive value for platform organizations from large volumes of user data. The process is described as one of value generation, converting collected data to information, processing information into knowledge, and, most valuably, to wisdom. He argues that the process is centered on analyzing velocity, volume, and variation within the data. Lopp concludes that the largest datasets are not to be found in content we share online, rather in the metadata generated from our online activity, from which commercially useful intelligence can be derived. Professor Geert Hofstede defines culture as collective programming of the mind, distinguishing groups or categories of people. To measure how organizational values influence culture, he conducted a study of data from 1967 to 1973 on IBM employees in over 70 countries. The study incorporated additional data over time, and posits that there are 6 identifiable aspects of culture which he terms dimensions: power index, power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance index, long-term orientation versus short-term normative orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. In a 2013 keynote speech, Professor Hofstede connects such collective cultural phenomena with individual cultural experience, arguing that collectivism and individualism operate differently when the society is networked. Culture being by definition something collective, Hofstede states that individuals have their personalities, but their cultures are what they share with others. Culture emerges then when such expression, generally called content in digital platforms, is interpreted, and Noam Chomsky, in Public Debate, argues that acquiring cultures requires relativistic judgment regarding the acceptance of content as truth, stating, "You can't acquire a culture without having a rich built-in array of constraints that allow the leap from scattered data to what it is that you require." Digital platforms have established a role in cultural formation, and in a 2001 report for the Council of Europe, Anita Rosenholk argues that internet technology means that culture is now at the heart of economic development. Rosenholk describes the essential need to establish a link between an ethical approach to development in the networked society, which is revolutionizing international cultural cooperation, and cultural policy internationally, ideally working towards a global common good. Regarding aspects of culture and heritage in the digital realm, to prevent certain abuses in which market forces would exploit heritage resources solely for profit. An example of the interaction between cultural media and profit is commercial or sponsored content. Professor Noam Chomsky, in addressing the interaction between media and society, posits a culturally desirable outcome as a more functional democratic society. Chomsky believes likelihood of this outcome is undermined by the need for socio-economic elites to impact economic activity in democratic populations, evidenced by the rise of public relations and advertising, first in the USA and then the UK, to control attitudes and beliefs. David Norfors, founder and CEO of not-for-profit organisation IIIJ, argues that algorithms can be designed to search and process online platforms' content, particularly social media, to quantify public opinion and other cultural aspects more effectively than traditional polling. He describes the plain logic underlying the algorithm design in evidentially cultural terms. Number 1. Words are connected by people. People are connected by words. Number 2. A community has a shared language. A shared language has a community. Number 3. Community and the shared language can be seen as one, the community and its memes. Digital platforms are accessed through user interface. Nash and Summerhays argue that software interface design has an influence in evolving the act of creative endeavor itself, citing the emergence of trial and error writing styles following the release of word processing software in the 1980s due to features such as copy and paste, unlimited undos, etc. Beyond the individual creative act, Bargava and Klatt argue that the internet, platforms in particular, support creative opportunity and economic growth for content providers, distributors, and creatives. The authors support their argument referencing evidence from Japan, Australia, South Korea, Thailand, and India. Based on their evidence, the authors posit that positive attitudes toward the online realm increases audiences for creative content in number and, critically, in the average time spent consuming digital content. They conclude that with audiences spending increasingly more time consuming digital media, that the creative sector will find a way to thrive. Digital platforms themselves are thriving with historically high valuations for dominant firms. Chowdhury et al. Cite the presence of digital platforms among the world's most valuable companies and differentiate platform and product-based value, asserting that platform beats product every time. Recent evidence is presented to support the view that platform design, because it focuses on aggregating communities, creates multiples of the value generated through product-based enterprise, and does so with dramatically fewer employees than other business types. This points to culture, a connector within community, as core to the economic value of online platforms. In addition, user activity on a platform spawns a separate valuable product in the form of datasets which can be manipulated to extract strategic information for resale. The commonly used term for this phenomenon is big data, and the combination of global reach and micro-measurement has profound consequences for the individual and at a global level. In Big Other, Surveillance Capitalism and the Prospects of an Information Civilization, Shoshana Zuboff characterizes the status quo. In this new regime, a global architecture of computer mediation turns the electronic text of the bounded organization into an intelligent, world-spanning organism that I call Big Other. New possibilities of subjugation are produced as this innovative institutional logic thrives on unexpected and illegible mechanisms of extraction and control that exile persons from their own behavior. Indeed, data from monitored online behaviors is used to influence the behaviors of others online using processes to gather and display social proof in digital platforms. Goldenberg et al. Present research data to show that content labeled "people who liked this also liked" have more impact than system-generated recommendations labeled "related videos." Platforms with both recommendation types most strongly influence the encountering and exploration of content, where individuals are exposed to the stimulus in the user interface of content suggestions based on user-generated links. They further show that the same influence cannot be replicated with other means of content suggestion, such as relevance similarity based on machine-readable descriptions. Progressing from choice in relation to content encountered is the consideration of the content itself. Cass Sunstein describes Bayes' rule as it applies to those encountering new content, specifically Bayesian updating, which is how we update rationally on receiving new information. He describes it as distinct from confirmation bias in that it is psychologically directed, a good news, bad news effect, motivated reasoning regarding new information as it relates to one's established convictions. That is to say, if the new information is strongly divergent from established convictions, it is less likely to be accepted to update one's belief. Sunstein further describes how the internet is driving political fragmentation, polarization of opinion and peoples, leading in some cases to extremism. In The Interpretation of Cultures, Clifford Geertz describes the formation of meaning in the world around us, as we form what he calls a thick opinion of any sign we observe. This opinion is based on our understanding of possible meanings of a sign before our actual interpretation, incorporating the current context. Geertz uses the example of a wink as a cultural sign whose meaning can very much change with the context of use. The wink gesture, being time-based, is a useful reference in the context of this essay, in that it requires the attention of the individual in the moment. The attention economy is a term credited to Michael Goldhaber in a 1997 paper, where he predicted that attention would replace money in some transactions. Current online platforms are replete with examples of such attention-focused transactions, such as free apps in exchange for the viewing of advertising. Even in contexts where no money is exchanged, most platform users do not pay money for platform utility. Money flows upward in the economy in the form of stock valuations of platform companies such as Amazon, Apple, Google, etc. The thinking underlying the attention economy has antecedents in earlier publications such as Herbert Simmons' 1971 paper, where he argues that in an information-rich world, the wealth of information means a dearth of something else, a scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention, and a need to allocate that attention efficiently among the overabundance of information sources that might consume it. Goldhaber extends the attention economy argument in a later 2006 paper to describe the dual transactional aspects of the attention economy as both a surrogate for money and as a method of reward valued by users of the attention economy, an intrinsically scarce entity, namely, the attention of other human beings. This second aspect is expressed in platform interfaces in devices such as Facebook likes. In a 1997 Wired magazine article, Goldfaber refers to the exponential scope of attention-based online technology from individual to culture to economy. As the net becomes an increasingly strong presence in the overall economy, the flow of attention will not only anticipate the flow of money, but eventually replace it altogether. Goldfaber states that this economy can be rich and complex because attention spent and received comes in many forms: love, recognition, heeding, obedience, thoughtfulness, caring, praising, watching over, attending to one's desires, aiding, advising, critical appraisal, assistance in developing new skills, etc. That human attention takes many forms is central to the position adopted by former Google product philosopher Tristan Harris. Harris, through his TimeWellSpent.io organization, addresses impacts on individuals of the mining of the many forms of attention referred to above. Harris describes the feelings of anxiety of missing out caused by major platforms and apps today, and posits that all of this psychology emerges because of this one thing in my pocket, the smartphone. And we have never had such a media device that literally 1 billion people are being programmed in the same way, where so much influence is in the hands of a few technology designers. Influence itself is a central concern of big data, to measure and affect influence using data generated by platform measurements or metrics. Joe Edelman argues that the key metrics of any platform reveal the foundational goals underpinning its design. He asserts that mismatch between platform goals and user goals creates negative outcomes for all end users. Algorithms, the mathematics of choice, architecture in platforms, are, as a model of choice making, simple maximizers, according to Edelman, which does not match the more complex and human model of reasons-based maximizers. Edelman posits that the scale of this mismatch between individual and platform goals signals an impending paradigm shift, a move to higher ground. Platforms or gateway organizations which use metrics as human values related to living well, whole person analytics, could be implemented in platforms such as YouTube to better support user agency and goals. This, he continues, would shift emphasis to value more durable, trust and or utility measured user relationships rather than the current metrics focused on the amount of time people spend using digital platforms and the associated UX techniques to maximize time spent. Nick Johnson, author of Modern Monopolies, describes online platforms as connecting people by creating the place for them to exchange, whether a physical or digital place. Johnson argues that online platform business models have delivered very efficient value-generating entities, with consequential issues similar to earlier industrial monopolies such as equality, exploitation, and ownership. He cites contemporary discussions related to online platforms questioning working time of Uber drivers, legal standing of Airbnb vendors, etc. The author describes cooperative implementations of the digital platform business model as having a different culture based on shared ownership or participation of the users in the ownership of the platform. Not simply a sense of ownership or community, but an actual equity stake, such that the platform itself exhibits culturally based characteristics. Culture is the glue that holds society together, posits Professor Gert Hofstede, which can be measured by observing collective phenomena and comparing cultures. Hofstede differentiates between national and organizational culture largely by reference to the conscious and unconscious acquiring of culture, where one grows within the national culture of a life situation, a topic for anthropology, and one consciously enters organizational culture, a topic for organizational sociology. National culture is referred to in the discussion as the unwritten rules of participation in everyday social relationships, and organizational culture, while similar to national culture, has rules which are more pragmatic, explicit, changeable, and less profound. Online platforms are organizations which facilitate cultural exchange, and this places them on both sides of Hofstede's construct. Cultural phenomena are amplified through online platforms, posit Meaning et al., who identify key outcomes of the emphasis in online technology on interaction as the celebrating of common experience through participation, collaboration, and sharing, leading to remix culture and internationalization amongst other cultural phenomena. As an example of remix culture, the authors reference the strutting Leo photographic meme of placing cutout images of a celebrity in new photographic contexts. Professor Mark Deuss defines his use of the word culture to mean the values, norms and practices and expectations shared and constantly renegotiated of a group of people. He identifies core characteristics of digital culture as participation, remediation and bricolage, borrowing, hybridity, mixture, plagiarism. Gardner and Davis describe the emergence of somewhat superficial forms of behavior which they posit as facilitated and mediated by online platforms, describing a copy and paste culture and reaction as a dominant cultural motif in online platforms. Most online platform interfaces accommodate reaction to specific content in comment forms and like functionality. In a 2016 Digital Content Conference keynote lecture, Jaron Lanier argues that the trend regarding the rewarding of creative output in the era of online platforms is extreme inequity in the spread of incomes, particularly in the music industry being amongst the first to be disrupted by platform technology. Lanier proposes a scenario where the platform is designed with actual payments to creatives, rather than the current predilection of current platform design of using payment surrogates, such as the use of social capital in place of money. Lanier argues that this is incompatible with human life cycles in terms of changing circumstances over a lifetime. Author Nicholas Carr describes the greatest long-term influence of the internet over how we think as a defining characteristic of the internet to date, which is that it seizes our attention only to scatter it with rapid-fire delivery of competing messages and stimuli. Carr argues this influence is a result of the intellectual ethic of the technology, that while language is native to humanity, modes of communication such as reading and writing are learned technologies, and as such are influenced by related technological change. Thus, the highly plastic human brain is negatively influenced. Carr continues that this scattering of the attention impacts the brain and reduces learning capabilities by undermining transfer from our short-term to long-term memory. Author and senior researcher at the Berkman Center, Harvard, David Weinberger, argues that internet technologies require us to be more meta-aware in relation to content consumed. He describes issues around content provenance and quality in pre-internet technologies being dealt with by practices of editing, curation, and distribution, all being constrained by physical form, which does not apply to digital platforms. He further argues that the essential nature of platforms is interconnections between users and content, and that each variation on original content through such distribution potentially weakens the evidentiary value of content. Therefore, the individual must be more aware of the context of content. Content in online platforms is managed using software agents, programmed algorithms, which influence what content is encountered by each user, and which further gather data from user activity. In a 1995 paper, Jaron Lanier argues that software agents are wholly inappropriate and of real consequence to the near-term future of culture and society. Software agents tailor an individual's digital experience by modeling their digital behaviors and attempting to reflect back more relevant content, etc. Lanier contends this approach is low fidelity and self-reinforcing, resulting in the lowest common denominator approach to content that plagues TV. He argues that rather than improving one's interactions with digital environments, software agents dehumanize people by making decisions on their behalf, thus limiting their contexts, potential, and ultimately limiting their liberty in the digital realm. An agent is a way of using a program in which you have seeded your economy. In public lecture, Jaron Lanier asserts that the term advertising has been repurposed by advertising online platforms to mean micromanagement of the options that are available to people. This effectively gives Google cultural influence in respect of the 89% of global online search queries it mediates, as at January 2017. Joe Edelman asserts that platforms increasing their reach into our decision-making process, such as how we choose to spend our time or attention, move from simply streamlining to now structuring people's lives. Edelman posits that individuals in this new context need to trust online platforms will support the individual's values, and this will lead to competition between platforms over alignment with their users' human values. He continues with a sharp critique of the world's largest platforms. At present, all platforms are terrible at this. Facebook, Apple, and Google, from their notification screens to their feeds, they ignore their users' will and intent. They ignore their users' values. They abuse users by directing their attention towards advertising or towards greater platform engagement. Regarding the impetus driving platforms aggressively vying for our attention, Tristan Harris posits that the ongoing expectation of growth within a capitalist system, allied to the finite nature of human attention and platforms' successes in winning our attention, all combine to create problems for users. In the current model for advertising, particularly engagement-based advertising, the problem is not a rectangle, meaning the adverts themselves, in terms of attention or distraction. The problem is the unbounded desire to take more of your time, and having the power to persuade you and get you to spend more time. Use of cognitive science to create persuasive design patterns is particularly effective in the case of online platforms, as they are essentially ongoing experiments of comparative measurement to optimize for the goals of any online platform. As an example, Tristan Harris refers to the notification alert icon in the Twitter interface, which is displayed after a short time delay, as a variable schedule reward, whereby the time delay allows tension to build before the person discovers if they have any activity updates, and this psychological reward encourages habit to form. The endless scroll design pattern common in social media is another example of the variable schedule reward conditioning method. Harris argues that people should have greater interface control, such as the ability to customize their phone lock screens, because the current scenario of that being defined by platform owners, such as Apple, means that the entire experience at each phone use is framed to optimize for platform goals rather than the individuals. This becomes particularly emphasized given timing and frequency of over 2.5 billion phone users checking their phone repeatedly, and may be analogous of the 2001 US legal judgment against Microsoft regarding the embedding of their Internet Explorer software into the Windows operating system. Joe Edelman argues that successful platforms measure their success primarily by the amount of time users spend on the platform. The cumulative effect of platforms acting to maximize the amount of users' time spent is, asserts Edelman, damaging to quality of life, intruding on the individual's time to draw them into the platform use through various UX techniques such as interruptive notifications. Will Schroeder describes some outcomes of living in an attention economy based on the foundational techniques of instilling habits in people to get their attention and hold it. He asserts it's why Netflix has autoplay. It's why most social media platforms have an endless scroll. Schroeder ascribes a general rise in popularity of sensationalist content designed to grab attention. He describes social media platform strategy based on user data analytics, which is designed to fight against one's urge to click off the platform. It's the perfect ding noise, the surprise notification, the like, the love. It's an endless flow of rewarding stimuli that keep you coming back. We're just living for the brief burst of dopamine that comes from liking, swiping, and refreshing. Schroeder describes the attention getters and the attention engineers, meaning the content providers and the online platforms combining to keep us in a cyclical system of attention-absorbing content and advertising to monetize our attention, and in doing so, harm our freedom to make more life-positive choices, such as propensity to personal interactions and deeper thought. In his book, The Second Machine Age, Eric Brynjolfsson argues that we have reached an inflection point societally regarding the influence of technology in our lives through platforms and specifically the algorithmic artificial intelligence which drives them. He cites negative trending of average income levels in many societies and the forecast widespread unemployment due to the deepening degree of automation and AI. Brynjolfsson in interview, however, offers a more positive future view, centered on creativity, with the advice that one should focus on things that humans can do well, that machines can't do well, and those are often things that involve creativity. They often involve interpersonal interactions, motivating people, nurturing people, caring for people. There's going to be growing demand for those kinds of jobs going forward. To conclude this essay in the context of the title, an evident outcome regarding online platforms as agents of culture is that online platforms can be described as systems designed to foster interactions which can be analysed to create commercial value, thus creating value via a practice of commercial anthropology. In the context of platform as anthropologist, one can refer to Clifford Geertz's introduction to his collected essays entitled The Interpretation of Cultures. The concept of culture I espouse is essentially a semiotic one, believing, with Max Weber, that man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun. I take culture to be those webs, and the analysis of it, therefore, not an experimental science in search of law, but an interpretive one in search of meaning. Online platforms capitalize on the result of that search for meaning to generate commercial value from user data derived from systematized utility of human attention. To wit, Clifford Geertz proffers a succinct definition. The culture of a people is an ensemble of texts, themselves ensembles, which the anthropologist strains to read over the shoulders of those to whom they properly belong. Thank you.